Hello everyone, how's it going? This is the Bald Metal Nerd coming at you with another wonderful video. Obviously, you've read the title of this one. Um, the reason I'm making this video is Metal Mickey just came out with a video basically talking about his 5 favorite metal songs. And that made me think, I should do a top five video, but I'm not going to do my top 5 metal songs because that would be a pretty much impossible task for me to pick only 5 songs. I would probably pick 500 songs, and it'd be a 30-hour video, and no one would want to watch it for good reason. So I figured I would just do who I consider to be the top 5-ish, you'll see why, most important metal bands ever, most influential, whatever term you want to use. So now, are these my top 5, my personal top 5 favorite bands? No, that would be a somewhat different list, although I am a fan of all of these bands. So, yes, some of these bands are definitely on my top 5 list, and I'll probably make that video. Probably my next one will be my personal top 5 bands. But anyway, let's go ahead and just kind of dive into this. So who did I pick for the number 5 spot? Well, I picked a band that started out, if they had kept going on their original trajectory, I don't think they would have had any impact on metal at all. But they made a giant shift in direction, and they basically carried the banner of metal high in the 90s when very few other bands were. Definitely the most prominent band to come out of the 90s, and they definitely really pushed the genre forward. Based on what I just said, you probably know exactly who I'm talking about, but just in case you can't pick up on context clues, the band, of course, is Pantera. No denying that hugely influential, right? I think it's safe to say that if Pantera had not existed, or, not existed, if they hadn't, shifted directions with Cowboys from Hell and doing what they did with that, we would not have a lot of the things that we like. The modern metal scene would be completely different without Pantera. Easily. Hugely influential. I don't really know what else to say except absolutely giant band, and honestly, for fairly good reason in my opinion. So, my number 4 pick. I actually have 2 bands that are tied for number 4. I'm cheating a little bit. Sorry. 2 bands. Unfortunately, one of the bands, I don't own any of their albums. The other one, I have just about their whole discography. So, both of these bands had a giant impact on what I would consider the more extreme metal scene. And, just their impact can't really be overstated to extreme metal, in my opinion. One of the bands, unfortunately, I don't have any of their albums, is Venom. What can I say about Venom? If it wasn't for Venom, would black and death metal exist in the form that it does? I'm not sure that it would. It would probably exist, but I think it would probably be significantly different without Venom. They had a giant impact on extreme metal that really can't be overstated. And the band that I picked to tie with them, as far as impact on extreme metal, is Slayer. Again, same thing. Their impact on extreme metal is, what can you say, right? It's Slayer, right? enough said. So, my number 3 pick. Again, this is a cheat because I'm picking 2 bands. From here on out, my top 3, you probably can say it without me even saying who these bands are, because it's so obvious to everyone who knows anything about heavy metal at all. And as far as fame goes, these guys, well, all these bands that I'm about to name off, come on, right? So my number 3 pick. Now, these guys, they're not totally tied. I do think one is very slightly more influential than the other, and I'll explain why. So, but it's by a hair. So, my first number 3 pick, of course, is, to the surprise of no one, Iron Maiden. Obviously, by far, the biggest band of the new album movement, new wave of British heavy metal, obviously. They are known by everyone for good reason. Their influence on metal can't be overstated. If it wasn't for Iron Maiden, so many other bands wouldn't exist. Honestly, without Iron Maiden, I don't think power metal would exist at all. And a lot of other, forms of metal, right? There's just some. I'm not sure if progressive or symphonic metal would exist without Iron Maiden. What can I say about Iron Maiden except, obviously one of the most influential metal bands ever. So, the next band that I would say ties for number 3 is a band that often gets compared to Iron Maiden, and I recently did a video about this. Of course, I'm talking about Judas Priest. And why do I think Judas Priest is slightly more influential than Iron Maiden by like a hair? Well, the reason I say that is they came along first. They predated Iron Maiden. And along with, if I really dive into this, you'll figure out who the number 1 band is, but whatever. Along with one other band, really defined the sound of metal before anyone else did, right? The impact that Judas Priest has had on heavy metal just can't be overstated, right? These guys and one other band completely defined the genre. So, boy, I can't imagine who that's going to be. Moving on, the number 2 band. Gee, this is going to be a mystery, I'm sure, before I reveal it. Who else could it be other than, of course, Metallica, right? These guys definitely have sold more albums than any other metal band ever. And they have produced... Oh, it's upside down. They have produced, of course, some of the greatest metal ever. Hugely influential. They didn't invent thrash, but Jesus, I mean, if there was no... It's in how many millions of people, countless millions of people, got into metal because of Metallica, right? How many countless tens of thousands of bands started because of being inspired by Metallica? I mean, aside from the next band, I don't think any other band, aside from the next one, even really comes close to the impact that Metallica has had on metal overall. Not even close. So, not much to say, except Metallica is the obvious number 2 choice. So that only leaves one other band. Gee, I'm sure you haven't guessed who it is by now. Or you probably have. Who could it be? Oh, I suppose the band that started the whole fucking genre, right? Black Sabbath. Clearly, this is the most influential metal band to ever exist. Because, well, if it was not for Black Sabbath, all those other bands that I just got done talking about obviously wouldn't exist. Heavy metal simply wouldn't exist in the way that it does if it weren't for Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath, along with Judas Priest, defined the rules of heavy metal. Duh. Right? I mean, this was a no-brainer and predetermined. When I decided to do this list, no other band could make the #1 spot aside from Black Sabbath. So, anyway, that's pretty much it for the list. What I find interesting about metal in general is as far as the bands that have had the biggest impact on the genre, like by far the biggest impact, it's dominated by the UK and the US. I find that interesting. Yes, there are most definitely influential metal bands from other countries. Creator immediately springs to mind. Germany. At the Gates. I could go on and on and on. I'm not going to. Sepultura. Sorry. But as far as the bands that have had the most impact on metal, obviously the UK and the US, by far, define the genre more than any other two countries. And I just find that kind of interesting. Just a reflection that I have on the genre. So anyway, in the comments below, let me know if you agree or disagree with this list. If you think there's a band that should have been on this list that didn't make it. Whatever. Again, I'm not saying these are the best bands to ever exist, just the most influential. Although, I would say probably all of those bands that I listed, with the exception of Venom, are among the best metal bands to ever exist. I mean, there's a reason all of these bands had such a big influence on metal. It's because the music is so incredible from all of these bands, or at least for a portion of their career. Now, a lot of these bands have made a lot of crap, but that's a whole other discussion. So anyway, that's it. If you like this, thumbs up. If you don't, blah, blah. Share, subscribe, all of the wonderful things. It really helps me out if you do it. Thanks so much for watching. Live long and prosper.